it's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink and listen. I run a Cursed Images website. The recent submissions are scaring me. I run a Cursed Images account. You probably know the type if you spend any time online. I like to joke that my site is the 11th most popular Cursed Images account, and if you can think of one, it's probably a competitor. Well, I used to run one. It's down now, though. I don't think it matters much anymore. Well, the site was downright simple to run, and I got a lot of submissions. Most days I woke up and checked the various places people had sent me photos to consider. Email, Dropbox, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Once I had enough followers, people made the rest of it almost automated for me. I picked out 4 images for the day and scheduled them to post on my website. Once they went live on the website, they automatically reposted on all my social media, where people shared them, and then more people saw them and followed me and sent me stuff. I never made any money, but I had a lot of followers. It was fun. The whole thing took maybe 20 minutes a day before work. So, what is a cursed image? It's hard to describe, but it's a photo that makes you uneasy. A picture that, well, as you look at it, gives you a gnawing feeling of dread. I don't like the edited ones, like the pictures where someone's mouth has been photoshopped over each of their eyes. No, I like real photos, ones that get under your skin and are eerie and unsettling and creep you out just a bit. The heavy feeling that starts in your gut and crawls up to your head. Well, the first picture arrived just about 3 months ago. I checked my Dropbox, and there it was. 100.jpg. I opened it and saw a patch of disturbed dirt in a field at night. Not a great one, honestly, and I stuck it in a folder with the rest of the rejections before continuing my day. The next day, I had another one in the Dropbox. 99.jpg. I opened it and immediately recognized it as the same place I'd seen the day before. In this one, I could see a shallow grave dug in a field, with what looked like a body laid at the bottom of it. Now, this might sound crazy, but it really used to happen all the time. People tried to scare me. They pulled elaborate pranks on me. They hoped to get a fake photo on the site so they could brag about fooling me with it. Oh, this one didn't even look entirely real. I moved it into the rejection folder and forgot all about it. The next morning, another photo appeared. In this one, a horribly flayed body laid on the ground next to a shovel. There was too much blood to see much of it, and honestly, it still didn't look real. 98.jpg went into the rejection pile, though I was amused at this point. I mean, most people either sent one fake photo or overloaded me with them. This one was working in reverse order and being clever about it. The next day I got a movie. 97.mov. I watched it. I watched it again and vomited. I watched it a third time and called the cops. This one showed the death of the person in the other 2 images, and there was no doubt it was real. The victim, who'd been horribly tortured, had been stabbed over and over. Well, the police were disgusted, but also unimpressed. They took a copy of the files and told me to email them if I got more, but that, well, it was probably a prank. Even if it wasn't a prank, there was no way to know where in the world this had happened. And they probably didn't have jurisdiction. The next day switched back to photos, still in descending order. Each one showed the victim in a cell, in the midst of being horribly tortured. Each one was the same. No metadata, nothing distinguishing. I couldn't even see the victim's face in any of them. I just knew I was looking at a relatively young man tortured for a very long time. Well, after a month, I finally snapped and deleted my Dropbox. The police weren't responding to my emails anymore, even to confirm they'd received them, and I couldn't keep looking at these photos. The next day, photo 68.jpg landed in my Facebook DM from an account with an obviously fake name and photo, that of a fairly well-known celebrity. I blocked the account, but each day the photos still slipped through. I changed my Facebook settings so I couldn't receive messages anymore. Then I did the same with my Twitter. I deleted my email address and used a new one that I didn't post online. I also reduced the number of images posted. Well, I had a lot of submissions left over, but people started to complain. My social life suffered. I come home and lock myself in, feeling anxious about the arrival of the next day's photo. Still, the pictures made it through. My personal Facebook, my personal email, a text message on my phone. Every time I deleted an account, it just showed up in another, even ones I'd never posted online. I scanned my computer for viruses, but nothing changed. 50. 45. 20. For some reason, I was growing increasingly frantic as each day passed, feeling that I drew closer to some awful truth I was better off not knowing. 7. 5. 2. One morning the photo was an email in an alumni account I forgot I'd had. The next, it printed out of my printer. The first photo showed the victim lying in a cleaned cell. They had a bag over their head and seemed to have been just put there. It was horrible to know what followed, but it had a feeling of finality somehow. The next morning I woke up and realized there was no picture. With a sense of freedom, I logged onto my website to post the day's photo and saw there was one already there. It was the cell I'd seen so many torture photos in, but now it was empty, clean. An old-fashioned sign that said vacancy hung on the bars, and the file name was 0.jpg. I deleted my website and every account I had. If someone could hack my account, I didn't want it anyway. I threw my laptop in a drawer and called my internet company to cancel my service. I tossed my phone in the trash after that and picked up a new one on sale at a place down the street. I woke up the next day feeling uneasy but hopeful. There was really no way to reach me. I hadn't even given the new phone number to my parents. I went to work and settled in nicely. That is, until the mail came. Tucked in along with some packages I was expecting was an envelope with a number -7 on it. I opened it and found a photo of someone sleeping. I couldn't make out any details. It was taken in a dark room. You could see someone in bed, but nothing distinguishing. Well, I got fired about 5 minutes later, right after I'd unloaded on Betty, the nice lady who did our mail. Well, she had no idea what was wrong, and I still feel bad about that. The next morning I woke up and, still trying to figure out what to do with my day, almost slipped on the next photo. The envelope, marked -6, had been slipped under my front door during the night. This photo showed the same sleeping figure in bed, but this time it was taken from further back. I could see the room. I saw the framed poster over my bed of my favorite movie. The lamps I'd bought at a garage sale because I thought they looked cool. I saw myself, sleeping. Worse, I could see the beer can I left on my nightstand last night, something I never usually did. This photo had been taken just hours before, while I slept, by someone in the room with me. I dug my laptop out and powered it on. I looked through all the horrible photos again, this time ignoring the fact that I couldn't see the face of the victim. Now I noticed the scar on my side from where my best friend caught it with a stick in 2nd grade. I noticed the birthmark on the back of my knee, the mole on the side of my neck. I watched myself be slowly tortured over the course of several months before dying. I watched the video again, realizing that the screams were mine, or what would be left of me by then. I'm on the road now, but I don't know where I'm going. I know I have just a few more days before that empty cell is supposed to be full. Only a few more days before whoever or whatever is hunting me plans to begin torturing me to death, slowly. I'm gonna run. I don't know if I'm gonna make it, but I'm gonna try. mother-in-law was poisoning me. Then I found out why. Everyone has their own nightmare in-law story, though I couldn't imagine how bad mine would be. As it turns out, the worst thing wasn't my mother-in-law poisoning me. The worst thing was why she did it. I met Craig on one of my rare vacations, and we had sort of a whirlwind relationship. We fell hard for each other and were married in a courthouse wedding within 2 months, without ever meeting each other's families. Mine visited a few weeks later, and after their initial shock, really liked Craig. While we got moved in together and figured out married life, I got to hear more about his parents who lived near the rest of his extended family a few hours away, though we never saw them. Well, my work schedule is rough. I work 6-7 days a week, and my off days are a blur of appointments and errands. I think in the 2 years before I met Craig, I only left the city once. I finally got a few days off so we could head to visit his family about 6 months later. His whole family came over, and everyone seemed thrilled to meet me, except for his mom, Betsy. She was cold and distant, and could sit there without saying a single word to me. It was creepy, but I kept trying to spark up a conversation. On our last day, he announced that we should take an afternoon hike up into the national park that their house sat on the edge of. Betsy made lunch, and I was changing to go out when it hit me. Just waves of nausea. I wound up in the bathroom for hours that afternoon. Well, I figured it was just a touch of something and thought nothing of it. We went back a few months later and again had a great time, except for Betsy. Well, she wouldn't talk to me, though Craig brushed it off and said she was just getting to know me. He finally said we could rent jet skis the next day and explore a lake in the next town as a way to get out of the house and unwind, which made me feel better. I was excited to tell everyone where we were going, but it wasn't to be. After eating, I got so sick I could barely walk for the next 2 days. At this point, I started to get suspicious. No one else was sick, and we'd all eaten the same food. It seemed like Betsy must have been up to something, but it wasn't until our next visit, when a night in a romantic cottage another hour up the road was cancelled due to me getting sick, that I was sure. Betsy was poisoning me. Craig said that I was insane. He said it must be an allergy to something his mum used in her cooking, which actually made sense, though I never had time for an appointment to get it checked out. Still, I decided on the next trip that I'd make a big casserole and bring it with us. If I cooked the food and served it, nothing could be added. Well, I hadn't had 2 bites before I realized I'd left the wine I was drinking unattended while I was heating up the casserole, and my stomach was already doing flips. You know what happened next, and it was not pretty. I was so sure his mum was poisoning me, and I confronted Craig about it. I told him I wouldn't visit his family again if she was there. It was our first big fight, but he finally said he wouldn't force me to visit, and we could figure out how best to deal with the situation. She'd never been nice to me, so it wasn't a loss. The next time I got off, we decided we'd head to that little cottage we'd rented before and not been able to use. We were driving right past his family's place, and it seemed rude not to stop, so we compromised and bought some pizzas. I even decided just not to drink anything unless it was water from the tap. We got in and threw pizza on our plates when one of his cousins arrived and everyone briefly left the food unattended. I realized my mistake almost immediately and decided to try an experiment. Craig and I both had 2 slices, so I just switched our plates while everybody was in the next room. Craig was so sick, I was really worried about him. The drive back to the city was awful. We had to pull off a lot, and he was a mess. We'd been back home for 3 days before I broke down and told him that I'd switched the plates. Well, I've never seen such anger before. The rage in his eyes is something I'll remember for the rest of my life. He shoved me into a wall and then came flying at me. He threw me over the couch, but I somehow managed to grab my keys and phone and ran out of the door, not even wearing shoes. I got lucky with the elevator and made it to a friend's place safely, finally turning off my phone after I'd missed his 47th call. I had no idea what to do, or when it would be safe to go home. It was the scariest time of my life. It was 2 days before I turned my phone back on. and when I heard the message from the police, I drove upstate immediately. Craig was dead. Betsy had shot him after he broke into her house and charged at her with a knife. I learned then that Craig had been married once before, and his wife had died on a tragic hiking accident. Craig had made a lot of money in the life insurance payout, and Betsy always suspected Craig had killed her, and was nervous about letting him be alone with me, especially out in the remote area he was so familiar with from his childhood. So, she ensured that every time he planned an outing that I'd be sick. It wasn't easy, but she didn't think I'd believe her, as no one else had ever shared her suspicions about Craig. I found the life insurance policies he'd taken out on me without my knowledge afterwards, and refused to press charges against Betsy. She was only trying to protect me. I still visit her from time to time when I need to get out of the city. Well, I love her cooking. I can read minds. Someone's trying to kill me. I can read minds. In fact, right now you're thinking, you can't really read minds. Just kidding, it doesn't work like that. From the time I was a kid, I realized I was different. I could tell what people were thinking, and while you might think that would be cool, it's actually confusing and people think you're scary. I learned pretty quickly not to talk about it. It took longer to figure out how to use it. People are thinking all the time. If I'm within about 50 feet of them, I can hear their thoughts in my head. It was awful to get used to. My mum was the only person who knew the truth, and since she's gone, my secret is forever safe. You see, all thoughts sound the same. I don't hear them in the thinker's voice. I hear them in a weird, androgynous voice that sounds the same no matter the thinker. So without some clues, I'm stuck wondering who the thought's coming from. I spent most of my childhood with all my teachers thinking I had trouble learning, when in fact I was just trying to figure out how to stop the thoughts of the other 25 kids in my class from overwhelming my brain. Anyway, I don't have many friends, and relationships are hard. You might think reading your partner's mind would be great, but trust me when I say you don't want to know everything that they find annoying, unattractive, or weird about you, but are too kind to say. It's not easy. Professionally, I figured out a way to use my special gift. I turned myself into an above-average student by realizing I could figure out what everyone else thought the answers were on exams, and I did quite well when I could get some solitude and work on papers myself, without others' thoughts intruding. I went to law school and opened a small firm with my best friend, Nathan. We specialize in contract negotiations, and got a great reputation for our negotiating skills. Well, as it turns out, having someone in the room who can read the mind of the other side helps a lot. Plus, he understands my need for solitude, even if he doesn't know that it's due to me being overwhelmed by hearing the thoughts of others. He just thinks I have a sixth sense for negotiating, which, in some ways, I guess I do. Sorry, I'm rambling. I'm pretty scared right now and don't have time to get all of this down. My problem started 2 weeks ago. We're in the middle of our largest negotiation ever, a merger that would really put us on the map. However, the other side has only met us in person a handful of times, so I've been of limited use and it's been stressing me out. We're getting ready for a few big sessions and I know I need to deliver. And not surprisingly, I've been having nightmares almost every night. I was tossing and turning one night when I heard the thought clear as day. It was enough to make me sit up straight in bed. Gonna slip in and slice his throat. One of these windows has to be unlocked. He needs to die. It was the voice that means I'm hearing someone's thoughts. Well, I ran to the window and looked out, but saw no one in the dark. I live alone in a remote area, kind of a necessity with my condition, and shouldn't be able to hear anyone unless they're near my house. Well, I shook it off as probably a nightmare, still not being totally awake. And the next night, it happened again. As I stood looking out into the darkness surrounding my house, I thought I saw movement, but couldn't be sure. Either way, I was done messing around. Someone was sneaking up to my house in the dark with thoughts of murder on their mind. I bought about 20 motion-activated lights that day and stuck them all around my house. Well, that night several popped on, and I heard someone curse in my head. I didn't hear anything after that. Whoever the psycho was, that had taken care of it. I still added an alarm system, state of the art, and started coming to work earlier and staying later, which was easy because I wasn't feeling ready for the negotiation we had coming up. The day of the big negotiation came and the office was packed. I hadn't had any other issues at home, but still hadn't been sleeping well with the stress. As I walked into the meeting, I heard one thought cut through the rest. I hate him. I looked around. Could have been any of the 50 people in our office, thinking about anyone. I brushed it off and went into the meeting. Our negotiations were brutal. Tons of minutiae, not a lot of bigger picture stuff. We went for 10 hours with only a few breaks. We cleared out to let people run to the bathroom when I finally got it. One of the partners on the other side was going through notes, and I found myself in the room alone with him. He was concerned about the total amount we were going to push for, and thought about how high they were willing to go before walking away. Well, it was a full 15% more than we thought we'd be able to get. I almost ran out of the door to Nathan's office. This is the highest they're going to go to before walking away. I slid it across the desk. He stared at the number. Are you sure? If we push this high and this falls apart, we're screwed. I nodded. I know this will work. It did. That night, the whole office celebrated together. Hearing the warm thoughts of my co-workers washing through my head was an intoxicating feeling. I decided to duck out on a high note and head home. I walked into the parking lot and headed to my car. And that's when I heard it, clear as day in my head. Finally a chance to kill him. Can't believe he just wandered off by himself. I spun around, looking for a masked killer. But the parking lot was empty. I ran to my car. The next day in the office it happened again. I was in the break room when I heard someone's thoughts. Oh, those damn lights are keeping me away, but I could do it here if I get a chance. No mistake this time, and this wasn't random at all. I took my computer and went home. Over the next 3 days, I considered everyone in the office. It had to be someone senior enough that my death would give them a chance at promotion, but junior enough that they felt disrespected for some reason by me, and who had been with us long enough that they felt I was the problem that needed to be solved, with my weird hours and need for solitude. I went through the names 100 times. I checked Facebook and Twitter profiles. I barely slept, and had narrowed it down to 2 possible suspects. I stared at their faces, trying to figure out which one of them hated me so much that they tried to kill me. Nathan finally called after the 3rd day I didn't show up at or call the office, worried about me. He asked if I was eating or sleeping. Both answers were no, and I told him that someone at the office was trying to kill me. He said he'd pick up some food, and then we'd figure out how to catch this murderous asshole. He showed up with takeout and took one look at me before telling me to take a shower, which I guess I needed. I came upstairs and started getting ready to shower when I heard it again. Yeah, I can't believe he installed all this security and then just let me in the front door. I ran to my bedroom door and locked it before looking for my phone. It was downstairs on the counter where I left it. And I'm writing this, hoping someone reads it and can report what happened here. Nathan's knocking at my bedroom door now, asking me to come downstairs and talk to him. I can hear his thoughts, though, about how he does all the work and my weird lucky guesses get all the credits, about how killing me will finally give him the chance to get the recognition he deserves. I don't think I have long until he gets in here. I can hear him thinking about how strong the door is, and he just remembered that there's an axe by the back door for firewood. The Black Cloud. Did you know that in 1911 wolves killed a wedding party of 118 people in Russia? The New York Times described the survivors seeing a black cloud moving rapidly toward them across the snowfield. A pack of hundreds of starving wolves that slaughtered them while they traveled to what was supposed to be a celebratory banquet. I've been thinking about that story a lot lately. Well, I won't say where I am. The government's probably looking for leaks, and I need this warning to stay up for as long as possible. The information's too important to keep hidden. Animals had been acting strangely for a while, skittish, like something had spooked them. The neighbours in our little rural village complained about strange lights in the night. We all had ideas, the kind of idle chat that we're really good at. The winter had been too warm. Maybe there were crews looking to build that factory in the next town. Probably teenagers with those damn fireworks, drinking beer and being stupid. Oh, the night it happened was a full moon. I remember walking home from visiting a friend earlier in the evening and being amazed at how well lit everything was in the moonlight. I was too far from the first attack to hear the screams, but the news the next day shocked me. Wolves had attacked a campsite nearby. 15 people had been killed, and another 8 injured. While this wasn't unheard of, the loss of life was extreme and we were all shocked by it. However, there weren't any more attacks. People healed, and we mourned and then moved on. The second month was much worse. My neighbour's cousin had moved in after the attack so he could recuperate, and the neighbour had complained to no end about the inconvenience, by which he meant he couldn't hit his wife when he had a relative staying in his house. I heard his screams when it started. I remember looking at the window and seeing a giant wolf chasing him out of his house and being frozen by the sight. It was too large, unnatural, deadly. I locked myself in the basement for the night and prayed for morning. Sunrise brought only awful news and heartbreak. And our village was not large, and the 55 deaths shook it. Another 37 people were injured, and no one could explain how a pack of large wolves had descended across such a distance without being noticed, nor how so many of them had gotten into people's houses. I began to hear dark whispers, rumours that the survivors had been touched with some dark curse, that they were to blame for this. For the next month it seemed like we sat on a powder keg, the whole community counting down the days until the next full moon. I'm not sure how many people were killed that night. I know that the soldiers arrived the next morning and we were told that we were being relocated to a small city close by where we could be protected. Just a temporary safety measure, while the government killed an especially violent pack of wolves. After arriving in the city and being inspected for wounds by an army medic, we wound up in makeshift shelters. Villages throughout the surrounding area had been emptied into the city, and anyone who'd been bitten by a wolf was moved to a special quarantine at some camp outside the city. I never saw any of those people again, but I assume they're now dead. I spent a long day in line waiting for an examination. Another day spent in line waiting for my allowance cards for food and water. The third day I queued up for temporary housing and made a comment without thinking about how I'd still be in line when the next full moon rolled around. I've always been like that, prone to making comments without thinking. My last relationship ended when my girlfriend asked if I ever thought about getting married, and I said no. Well, the guard who heard me yanked me out of line, just as an old university classmate recognized me while walking by. Turns out he had an empty apartment I could use that was already furnished. For once my mouth had worked in my favor. I glanced with glee as I walked away from the swirling, serpentine line of people waiting for housing. The entire thing was a giant, hectic mess. Mistakes were made. Well, mistakes were always made. The atmosphere in the city was chaotic. The local priest began to warn about how we were being punished by the gods. They stood in front of the churches and shouted that salvation lay within, that they offered the only protection from God's wrath. Soldiers with rifles stood on every corner. Again, the countdown to the full moon set everyone on edge. One of the largest churches announced it would serve as a sanctuary, locking their doors to protect the flock within. I turned in early that night and barricaded the door. I don't know how many people in that church had been bitten, and I don't know what it must have been like when they turned, when the crowd realized they were locked in with them. I do remember the screams and the sirens outside. I remember the explosions and gunfire in the distance. I remember the next morning too, with all inhabitants ordered to appear for inspection, watching those who'd been bitten being taken away. And the morning after that, when the soldiers were gone. We were told that they'd built fortifications around the entire area, a barricade to keep this problem in. I heard they shot anyone approaching it. We were alone now, and there were other dangers beside the wolves. A group of hard men announced that they'd formed a local protection squad. They searched homes for people who'd been bitten and were being sheltered by protective families. They beat those who they thought were hiding from them and collected weapons and food for distribution. They were a hard-drinking, violent bunch, and the citizenry used to tough rule buckle quickly. They hung those who they suspected of having been bitten throughout the city as a public show of how they would protect us. Well, the internet had been blocked since we'd moved there, and every day I watched the news in a vain hope that our situation had been noticed by the outside world. Stuck in a city not my own, caught between a malicious ruling class and a pack of supernatural wolves, I prayed for deliverance. On the night of the next full moon, we were all ordered into our rooms at 3 p.m, long before sundown. I heard that the protection squad had found a bunker they were safe in. Someone said that only the two titular leaders, Anton and Xander, had keys. I heard that they locked themselves and their goons underground, waiting for morning. The wolves streamed into the city like an oil slick cuts through water, a line of darkness that you know will remain long after it appears to dissipate. Those who were living in less secure homes met a quick fate, and I watched from above and cried. I prayed for deliverance from my brutal reality. The protection squad inspected us again the next day, and again the day after that. Now they would stop people in the streets and order them to disrobe. You can imagine the liberties they took. The bite victims who they hung seemed to include a disproportionate amount of their detractors, but I said nothing, as in truth I was terrified. I prayed every night for a sliver of hope. It didn't come. It was almost 4 weeks later when I rounded a corner and watched Anton beating a man. "What are you doing?" The words had escaped my mouth before I realized I was speaking. The scene in front of me was clear. I saw the woman crying, the man, her father, standing between her and Anton, bleeding. Anton paced over to me and placed a hand on my shoulder. "This doesn't concern you. Carry on, friend." I looked at the pleading eyes of the man and looked at my feet. My words cut off as his fist hit my stomach. "Didn't I tell you to carry on?" he snarled as he circled me, looking for an opening to exact more violence as I tried to curl into a ball. He kicked my side and then my head. I heard a scream as the man threw himself onto Anton's back. I heard shouts and footsteps. A crowd had surrounded Anton, holding him back from attacking the man. And then, laughter. Anton announced he was ready for his prize fight against the wolves. The crowd dispersed quickly, leaving us alone. The man and his daughter shuffled past me. "Thank you," he whispered as he went by. I clenched my eyes shut until I was sure I was alone. I wanted for the pain in my body to subside. Minutes passed. Finally, I opened my eyes. There on the ground in front of me laid a key. It was days before I slipped through the city to the site of the bunker where Anton and his men would take refuge. I tested the heavy door of the bunker and found it locked. I looked around and, finding myself still alone, I pulled the key from my pocket and inserted it into the lock. It turned. Relocking the door, I hid the key away and hurried back to my apartment to think. We were all ordered to our homes at 3 p.m. again the day of the full moon, and I thought out my strategy. The plan was flawed in 100 ways, and I couldn't fathom how it ended if not in my death. I watched the streets empty, first of citizens, then finally of the protection squad searching for stragglers. The sun grew lower in the sky, as I changed into a pair of dark clothes and grabbed a hammer. At dusk, I slipped through the door to my building and began my journey. I slinked through the empty streets, hearing the distant howls begin. My plan was simple. Unlock the door, destroy the lock with the hammer, and run back to my apartment before the wolves got me, while stranding the evil men in the bunker without a safe haven. It was a dumb idea. The light dropped out of the city quickly. Few streetlights still came on, and all of the buildings appeared lifeless, though I knew they were teeming with life, hidden behind boards and crouched under beds. I arrived at the bunker and smiled. I'd made it. I walked towards the door when a sound made me turn. A wolf stood behind me. Oh, the beast was giant. I've seen a mastiff once before, and this creature was at least twice its size. I clutched the hammer in my hand, trying to decide if I could fight it off, when I saw another behind it, and then another. A tear ran down my cheek, and I dropped the hammer. I would not survive this night. There are bad men in there. Again, the words poured from my mouth before I realized I was speaking. The wolf stared at me. In the bunker. I came to unlock the door, I continued. You can eat me, just let me unlock the door. In that moment, the wolf inclined its head ever so slightly. I took a step backwards and then another. Moving slowly, I pulled the key from my pocket and inserted it into the lock. I turned it and opened the door, stepping to the side as I did so. I felt a breeze as the large animals flew through the door into the bunker, and heard the confused screams from within. I waited until the wolves poured back out of the bunker, away from me, and left the city. I walked back to my apartment unharmed, and spent the night staring at the ceiling. In the morning I walked out of the city. I heard bits of confused conversation, and knew I had hours before anyone tried to exert control. I walked into the woods and kept walking, picking up bits of a trail here and there. I slept under the stars and walked further the next day, finally coming to a small camp that night. The people who greeted me were warm and friendly. They explained the changes they suffered through, how they were trying to control their hunger to harness it. They did not wish to harm the innocent, and in me, they finally found an ally who might understand. I'm writing this from a small government office in the Western Barricade. There are 4 of us inside now, posing as soldiers. There have been enough reinforcements that no one knows who exactly is supposed to be here and who isn't. The next full moon is in 3 days. When the 3 men with me turn, the guards will be distracted. I'll open the doors for the rest of the pack, and we'll be through the barricades. The priest said the wolves were a punishment from God. Now I realize he's right. They're a way to punish the evil in the world, to wipe away the unjust. We're building something beautiful. After this full moon, we'll be free. And then, maybe we'll be at your home for the next one. There's a lot of evil in the world, and the pack is hungry. So 4 incredible stories there for you from the pen of Nick Moore. Well, the computer keyboard of Nick Moore anyway, but really, really good stories there for you. Hope you enjoyed that short collection. Been featuring him a few times on the channel now, and for good reason. A lot of his stories were nominated for various awards over on NOSLEEP. Quite rightly so, of course. And I'm really enjoying doing his work. Well, that's another Friday done and dusted. Would you like a story from me for tomorrow? Let me know if you would. I've got a few things already recorded that are ready to go on the channel. And of course, keep going with the podcast. Have you found the podcast yet? Go on, tell me. You haven't, have you? You've not been paying attention to my second channel. Go check that out because the podcast is available anywhere you could possibly want to find it. And I also upload it to my second channel as well. So, how have you not been listening to it? What's wrong with you? Alright, well, little rant there. not a rant, but go and check out the podcast because it's a whole new way of listening to me and downloading and, well, listening at your own leisure, however you want to. Well, till next time, very, very sweet dreams and bye-bye. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. It really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams, and bye-bye.